In the night sky, there lies another world. Enjoying a stargaze is one thing, but to study the bright pinpoint fractals is not only a science, but a canvas that cannot even be completed in a lifetime of far-reaching exploration. Only a handful of people throughout history can claim to be a master of astrology, and only one of them was an emperor. He is a man most commonly referred to as Ulugh Beg, translated most closely as Great Ruler. If you don't want to be betrayed online, then I suggest you look to today's sponsor, Aura. Have you ever Googled yourself before and didn't like what you found? It's unsettling, isn't it? Seeing your personal information just out there, for sale to the highest bidder. I mean, after looking up my name, I found 4 data broker sites selling my information. One even had my previous home address, and when I searched my email, it got worse. I counted 12 sites, but I'm sure there's more. It's like, hey, that's my private information. Who gave you the right to sell it? And you know what's even crazier? These data brokers, they're selling our information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who wants to target us. It's a real violation of our privacy. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information, automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my digital footprint not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it also protects me from hackers who could use this information to access my accounts or steal my identity. And let's be real. It's not just data brokers we have to worry about. Sometimes it's companies we're supposed to trust. Like how AT&T recently revealed that over 73 million customer records were released on the dark web. They recommended using strong passwords, monitoring account activity, and considering credit freezes or fraud alerts. But who has the time for all of that? Well, Aura does it all for me. And the best part? I don't have to download a bunch of different apps just because a company couldn't keep my data secure. Aura is always on, always working to keep me and my family safe. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com and try your first 2 weeks for free. The link is also in the description below. Far from the Eurasian steppe of his ancestors, Ulugh Beg was born Mirza Muhammad Taragai on March 22nd of 1394. The son of Shah Rukh and grandson of Timur the Lame. Inheriting from both of them a curious nature and a high ceiling for intelligence to prosper. Away from the bow that Timur was using to carve out an empire, Ulugh Beg was shown the finer things in life by his father Shah Rukh. While he would still learn how to ride a horse and be taught military strategy at a young age, most of the boy's time would be spent alongside a retinue of Islam's brightest tutors and scholars, and he wouldn't want it any other way. By the time Ulugh was 10, his grandfather had completed his destructive path across the Middle East and carved out a mighty empire. But when Tamerlane died in 1405, every single member of the Timurid dynasty was at stake to lose it all, or become the Timur of their time. As the empire was thrown into separation and civil war, Ulugh Beg's father, Shah Rukh, emerged as one of the leading claimants. Ulugh Beg would spend his early teenage years nervously behind the patient and stone-faced Shah Rukh. Eventually, in 1409, after 4 years of civil war, Shah Rukh marched his army onto the Timurid capital of Samarkand, unopposed, with Ulugh Beg beside him. With the gem of Central Asia brought into the fold, Shah Rukh was to be the sole successor of Tamerlane, and Ulugh Beg was to be the intellectual future of the Middle East. With Shah Rukh's stronghold being located in the city of Herat to the south, the city of Samarkand would take on a new role in this reformed Timurid empire. While Herat became the capital of Shah Rukh, Samarkand became the capital of Ulugh Beg, who became the governor of the city upon its capture. Without hesitation, the enthusiastic 16-year-old prince started his plans to turn Samarkand into a city of science incarnate. Thus began the golden age of the Timurid Renaissance. While Timur had forced all the scholars into Samarkand, it would be his grandson that would make it a metropolis of higher learning. Governor Ulugh Beg would be forced from his studies early on in his new position. An old threat reappeared in the form of Mogolistan. Its position so close to Samarkand would threaten the Timurid heartland. If Ulugh Beg did not act, then no one would. Along with the Timurid host, Ulugh defeated the army of the outnumbered Khanate and submitted them to a peace treaty with relative ease. Although most of his time was dedicated to the stars, Ulugh appeared efficient on the battlefield, taking his first victory and returning to Samarkand in earnest. Although the northern flank of the empire was secured, Ulugh Beg still did not have the proper funds to turn Samarkand into a beacon of education. This was due to the position of the empire as a whole, Shah Rukh having to pour funds into the military and other more neglected parts of the empire. In 1417, Ulugh finally acquired the money to construct a massive school, or madrasa. The building still stands to this day and would play host to some of Islam's most learned astrologers and mathematicians. The school employed masters of astronomy such as Qadi al-Rumi and al-Kashi, who were both extremely respected in their own right. The brightest pupil at this university, perhaps even more so than Ulugh Beg, was Ali Kushji, a student of weather, astronomy, math, as well as other natural sciences. Younger than even Ulugh Beg, Ali was the son of Ulugh's personal royal falconer, lending him a close connection with the governor of Samarkand. Together, they represented a fresh young face to the stars above, something that was in dire need of re-examining. In 1419, in a separate caravan from Shah Rukh's, Ulugh Beg would personally travel all the way to Ming China. Here he would meet with the Yongle Emperor at the imperial city of Beijing. He presented him with gifts, including a jet black stallion and horseshoes made by Samarkand's finest blacksmith. 20 years later, Yongli's successor would repay this gift by sending a portrait of that same horse to Ulugh Beg, among other more expensive treasures. Ulugh Beg no doubt spent time among the scientists and scholars of the Ming Empire, sharing discoveries, if only the Yongle Emperor was ready to spill the precious and sometimes advanced knowledge of the Ming. After being absent for 2 years, Ulugh returned to Samarkand, and just in time to see the completion of his madrasa. It is preserved as a UNESCO heritage site to this day. Not only did the madrasa play host to an ensemble of Islam's best minds, but it was also heavily diverse. Due to Timur's habit of sparing scholars during his many campaigns, Turkish astronomers mingled with Arabian mathematicians and Persians spoke philosophy with Brahmins from India. With his educational foundation set, let's take a look at Ulugh Beg's personal life. Apart from studying, Ulugh could be found hosting lavish banquets. When he wasn't observing the stars at night, he was either sleeping during the day, training militarily, although sparsely, or spending time in his harem along with his 13 wives. Only 2 years after his return from the East, Ulugh Beg would face a number of threats from the north. First, and perhaps more dangerously, the Golden Horde had unified yet again under the thumb of Batak Khan, a man that Ulugh Beg had helped to secure this position. Pacifying the north through alliance was a good idea, if Batak Khan did not turn on Ulugh as soon as he secured his power base. Having mistaken foe for friend, Ulugh Beg assembled his army to defeat the invading Golden Horde. Here he was embarrassingly defeated outright on the battlefield. The grandson of Timur was not raised on the bow like his predecessors, and it was starting to show. He returned to Samarkand to lick his wounds. Batak Khan would eventually be defeated by a civil war, and his successor would have a much friendlier and less traitorous relations with the Timurid Empire. Only a year after his first defeat, Mogulistan saw weakness and attempted to invade. Some miles outside of Samarkand, Ulugh defeated the Chagatai, reversing his fortunes and securing the north yet again. The governor of Samarkand, although with a setback, was still keeping the steppe checked. With the gold paid from the ensuing peace treaty, Ulugh Beg celebrated by christening the start of his crowning achievement, the Grand Observatory of Samarkand. At a very young age, Ulugh Beg, while accompanying Timur's army across Persia, came to see one of the greatest observatories of his day. Located in Maraghi, this building would serve as inspiration for many of the Islamic world's observatories, including Ulugh Beg's. A skilled architect named Kashani would be the one to invent this one-of-a-kind structure. The foundation of Samarkand's observatory took 2 years alone to dig out and lay. Decorated with marble on the inside, most of the structure actually laid under the ground, on top of a hill to offer more versatility and space for astronomical tools. After completing the base, the observatory stood 33 meters high, ordained with brick in the typical Turco-Persian patterns. After 4 years of construction, one of the most creative observatories in history was complete. Now, the skilled scholars of Samarkand finally had an instrument to keep up with their intellectual prowess. In a time before telescopes, the architect Kashani commissioned for a massive sextant to be built instead. At the time of its completion, it was the largest of its kind in the world, and could measure the stars on the same level as a high-powered telescope, when used in the right hands. Having picked 60 of his best astronomers and mathematicians, Ulugh Beg set off on a path of discovery and correction. The greatest astrologer in antiquity was none other than Ptolemy, a man who discovered many things about the stars and in more creative ways than Ulugh Beg. His works, although advanced for the time, were about 1,600 years outdated. One of Ulugh's first missions was to correct the otherwise unproven, perfect works of Ptolemy. He made new star charts, observing 11 less stars than Ptolemy, as well as correcting their positions in space. By the time Ulugh was done, he had built heavily upon his work, and had finished the preliminary portion of his exploration into the night sky. After 10 years of dedicated research, the scholars of Samarkand published the Zigi Saltini, a star chart whose accuracy would not be matched for over 200 years. The next few years would see a flurry of discoveries, including the near-accurate time of the sidereal year. In more simpler terms, the amount of time it takes the Earth to complete its rotation around the Sun. The calculation only added another 58 seconds to the year, making it the closest estimate until the works of Copernicus. A year later, Ulugh's team discovered a more accurate time for the year. They used an opposite strategy, observing how long it took for the sun to return to its original position in the sky. This only had the minute difference of an added 25 seconds, making it more accurate than Copernicus some 100 years later. The accuracy of this measurement would not be matched until Tycho Brahe, a few decades after the death of Copernicus. Even still, sometime after this, Ulugh Beg managed to create a near-accurate tilt of the Earth, observing a certain number of stars in accordance with Earth's seasonal rotations. But to be a master astronomer, you have to be an even better mathematical prodigy. Ulugh completed the trigonomic function of sine and tangent to the 8th decimal, the most accurate for this place in the world at this time. These are just some of the most important discoveries made by Ulugh Beg and his reputed team. Overall, these men would produce hundreds of scientific works in their time, and contribute to the sciences in a way that not many could match in a pre-modern world. While Ulugh was stuck to the stars, his father was presiding over a peaceful golden age of the Timurid Empire. In 1447, this would all change. A rebellion of one of Shah Rukh's grandsons and nephew to Ulugh Beg broke out in Iran. An aged and sickly Shah Rukh crushed his opponent before dropping dead himself, leaving Ulugh Beg as the new Timurid emperor, the most educated individual to hold this position. While Ulugh Beg, as his name suggests, was a great ruler, as a governor of Samarkand, the same would not prove true when he became emperor. Governing a city effectively was one thing, but the whole empire was a different challenge, perhaps harder to navigate than even the stars. During Shah Rukh's early reign, he only kept the empire together by the skin of his teeth. Ulugh would meet many of these same challenges as his nephew, Ala al-Dawla, claimed the throne and positioned himself around Herat in defiance. Ulugh marched and managed to defeat the rebel, who fled in retreat. After this, the newly crowned emperor turned on the city of Herat, the capital of his father. In his eyes, the Timurid Empire had but one shining city as its capital, and that was Samarkand. Ulugh proceeded as his grandfather might and sacked the city, massacring its population. This action was supposed to quell the internal squabbling, but it only served to strengthen the cause of the rebels, who no longer feared or respected their emperor. With help from his brother, Ala al-Dawla returned to face Ulugh Beg again. Together they defeated the Timurid emperor and handed Ulugh Beg his second and final defeat on the battlefield. The downtrodden Ulugh retreated to the city of Balkh, which was governed by his son, Abd al-Latif. Upon arriving, the empire unraveled further, when it soon became apparent that his own son had revolted against him. With his army in tatters, Ulugh had only to return to Samarkand. More trouble appeared as the city devolved into mass rioting. Ulugh dispersed these mobs, but by the time order had been restored, Abd al-Latif had marched on Samarkand. In 1449, he threatened to put the city to siege, sparing his city and its many Ulugh-sponsored buildings. The emperor of under 2 years abdicated his throne and became a prisoner of his son. Later in that year, Ulugh petitioned to make Hajj to Mecca. This was accepted and Ulugh started his way towards the Kaaba. He wouldn't leave Timurid lands before he was assassinated by men loyal to Abd al-Latif. What followed the death of Ulugh Beg would see the Timurids fall into near unending civil wars that would eventually cause the decline of the empire. Excluding the Mughals of India, the Timurids and Central Asia for that matter would never see a golden age and renaissance on this level ever again. Without its leader and emperor, the Observatory of Samarkand became a place for astrologists to argue rather than research. Eventually, the building fell into disrepair and collapsed onto itself. The underground section, along with the massive sextant, still remains, as well as the many discoveries made due to this hilltop trench. Only a year later, Ulugh Beg's body would be laid to rest alongside his father and grandfather in the Guri Amir Mausoleum by his nephew, Abdallah Mirza. If we compare the portraits of Abdallah to Ulugh Beg, we can see the absence of one thing: the stars. Almost as if they had left with the death of the great ruler. Ulugh Beg was many things. He probably could have been a great ruler, but was never really given the chance to do so. Instead, he created something more lasting that would transcend his own life and every astronomer in Samarkand. While we're nearing the end, let's take a look at some of the things named after Ulugh Beg. First, and unsurprisingly, a moon crater is named after him, as well as an asteroid belt. Thirdly, and rather strangely, there is a dinosaur called the Ulugh Begsaurus, which was named as such in 2021. The three great rulers of the Timurid Empire are perhaps the greatest example of the nomadic cycle. Timur was the conqueror, Shah Rukh was the consolidator, and Ulugh Beg was no longer a nomad, but more like the people Timur had conquered. Together, their collective achievements, although drastically different from each other, would never be forgotten. And that is the golden age of the Timurid Empire. If you'd like to support this stoic historian, feel free to do so on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And join Derek Clark, Savak Leo Nazarian, Taj Guilford, Nickmate Voician, Lazarus Dykos, Dave J, and Dalinar. Or become a YouTube channel member, like Derek Clark again, Donald Vincent, What? Why? And Nickmate Voician again. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it.